So thank you everyone for coming. My name is Kirsty Robson. I'm the Projects and Outreach Manager here at the Scottish Council of Jewish Communities, and we're delighted you've chosen to spend your evening with us learning a little bit more about what's happening to the Uyghur community. Before we introduce our guests, I'm delighted to say that SCoJeC is partnering this evening with Yet Again, a youth-led initiative seeking to raise awareness of modern atrocity by allowing young people a seat at the table to make change. As one of the co-founders of Yet Again, I know how important having partnerships and joint dialogues is to further this discussion. So thank you to everyone at SCoJeC for letting us have this conversation. We are absolutely delighted to be joined by two really incredible speakers this evening, both of which I've had the pleasure of working with before, starting with Rahima Mahmut, who is a Uyghur singer, human rights activist, and award-winning translator. She's the UK Projects Director for the World Uyghur Congress, the Director of Stop Uyghur Genocide, and advisor to the Interparliamentary Alliance on China. Rahima, thank you so much for taking the time to join us this evening. We're also joined by our chair this evening, Olivia Marks-Woldman from the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust. I've had lots of experiences working with Olivia, and her passion for making sure that we live in a safe society is just beyond belief. So thank you, Olivia, for coming along. We'd also like to extend our thanks to Michael Polak, who's not able to be here this evening. Michael's a barrister practicing in human rights, criminal and international law at Church Court Chambers. He's on the advisory committee for the World Uyghur Congress London office. And whilst he isn't able to join us this evening as advertised, he did sit down with me earlier this week so that we could record some information to share with you this evening about the legal perspectives on the Uyghur genocide. And without further ado, I'd like to just get this discussion going and hand over to our chair for the evening, Olivia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kirsty. Thank you to everybody. It's lovely to see so many familiar Scottish faces. And a particular thanks to Kirsten Oswald. We know how much pressure parliamentarians are under, and your support is particularly valued to give that leadership to this issue. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to start by making some assumptions about why we are all here. I believe we're all here because we want to learn more about the situation of Uyghur people. We want to inform ourselves. And secondly, that even though we might not know very much about the situation, we're all driven by empathy from what we've seen in the news or read in the papers. And those values underpin the work that I do at the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust. The value of robust knowledge, of evidence, knowing the facts, not relying on the echo chambers we sometimes inhabit or making suppositions. And the value of empathy, concern for others, care for their well-being, understanding how things feel from their perspective. And of course, knowledge and empathy together inspire action, which is why I particularly applaud the work of Yet Again, led by young people taking such positive action and making such a difference in the work that you're doing. And of course, the Scottish Council of Jewish Communities, working so hard for Jewish communities and their benefit right across Scotland. Congratulations for organising this event. Thank you. Every year, hundreds of thousands of people come together to mark Holocaust Memorial Day in January. There's a really strong desire for people to join with others for collective remembrance. And as we do that, we think of the ways in which the Holocaust has resonance for us today. There are so many. Anti-Semitism is on the increase in many places. Identity-based prejudice against gay people, Roma people, disabled people hasn't gone away. And of course, Holocaust denial and distortion still exist, and in some places are on the rise. But perhaps one of the most stark resonances today is the persecution we see happening to Uyghur Muslims in China. Some of the parallels have been shocking. Re-education centres trying to erase Uyghur language and culture, Uyghur people herded onto trains, bales full of hair shorn from Uyghur people. But make no mistake, history is not repeating itself. Any identity-based persecution is unique. There may be parallels and similarities. There will also be differences. So let's learn more about the situation this evening. Rahima, it's so lovely to see you again, and it's an honour to share this evening with you. Perhaps you could start this evening by telling us a little bit about who the Uyghur people are. Tell us something about your culture and your history in China.
Good evening, Olivia. Thank you so much. And it's just lovely to see you again. And thank you to yet again and Scottish Jewish community to organize this event. And I can't thank Kirsty and many of her friends, thank them enough for all the work that they have been doing in raising awareness and educating others, and doing so passionately, and that gives me hope. So Uyghurs, I am Uyghur myself. We believe it. We look different from the Chinese. So the language, the Uyghur people, we speak Turkic language. The Uyghur language is Turkic. The closest language in the Turkic family is the Uzbek language. So we don't need to learn Uzbek, we can communicate. Ethnically, as I mentioned, we are Turkic and mainly living in what we call East Turkestan, and officially the so-called Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, though we never had, in reality, the real autonomy. And we have our own very unique culture and history. We are Muslims, mainly Sunni Muslims. And culturally, we are very close to Istanbul or Samarkand rather than Beijing. And the history of the Uyghurs, we believe we are the indigenous, indigenous group, along with many other Turkic Muslims like Uzbeks, Tatars, Kazakh, Tajik, and who lived in the land of the Turkestan, East and West, and also the entire Altai region. And so the East Turkestan, or the Uyghur region, if you look at the geographically, it's a separate land. I'll come to that later. So the population, according to the Chinese own census, is 11.6 million, or about 12 million. But that is changing because of the birth control and deliberate controlling the population of the Uyghurs. But the Uyghurs always believed that Chinese government downplayed the number, and therefore in some sources you will see say that there are up to 20 to 25 million Uyghurs, and about 1 million live in abroad, mainly in Central Asia, about 50,000 in Turkey, and in the West, very small population. In the UK, I believe we are about 500 people, including the children born here. So when I arrived in 2000, I think there were less than 50, including some students or some scholars who were studying here in the UK. So we are the reason the Uyghurs are very small population in the Western country, because of the control. The Uyghurs, we cannot get passport easily. Even for me, it took me 1 year. Normally for the Han Chinese, it only takes 2 weeks maximum.
So Rahima, thank you for outlining that. That's a really helpful background. Can you tell us more about what's happening to Uyghur Muslims now in China, in the Xinjiang region? What's going on? What's happening?
So the Chinese Communist Party occupied the Uyghur region or East Turkestan in 1949. Since then, the disasters started one after another, from rightist movement, cultural revolution, and the many massacres that happened over the years. And their latest one was in 1997, and it happened in my city of Gulja, when a peaceful protest was crushed by the deploying Chinese military and killing over 100 and arresting thousands of the peaceful protesters. And that led me to leave my country in 2000. And that was the consistent persecution, discrimination since the occupation. Then in 2009, another protest very similar to what happened in 1997 erupted in Urumqi after an incident in Shaoguan province, where the Uyghur factory workers in Chinese province, they were rumored that raped a Chinese girl, and that they were beaten to death, many of them. And that video was posted on YouTube. And the students in Xinjiang University, they led a protest against the injustice, and asking for the government to take action against those who killed many Uyghurs who were working in the factories in Chinese province of and the city of Shaoguan. And that was a turning point. I'm mentioning this. So the peaceful protest again met with the very heavy-handed police and the military. Then the Uyghur youth and some other I can say some mobs too, and then started having conflict between the Chinese people. And that was reported that about 200 were killed, but not reported over 1,000 Uyghurs were killed during 2-3 days of crackdown. And since 2009, the July the 5th, that the anniversary will be very, very soon. That is a massacre that happened in Urumqi. The Chinese government introduced extrajudicial killing and extrajudicial arrests after that conflict. And then situation became deteriorated year by year. And then 2014, they declared that the Uyghurs are the terrorists, and they must be eradicated. So they said they are the people that enemy of the CCP, of the Chinese Communist Party. And during that, since 2014, they formed called a working group. So the working group formed of 6 people would go to villages, neighborhood committees to record every Uyghur, to check 20 years of their history and list them, whether they ever attended any kind of anti-government petition, protest, ever traveled abroad, etc. And then that was a preparation for mass arrest that started in 2017. So in 2016, the new announcement from the government that asking for all the Uyghurs between the age of 12 to 60 to go to hospital to give DNA samples and the so-called third generation ID card. They said we need all this information. So that was a time that we were already very scared. And when I saw some of the kind of snapshot videos of the Uyghurs stood in long queue outside like little clinics or the hospitals for them to give all this like iris scans, DNA, basically the almost every information that is bio data collection. And we already felt very, very worried. And that reminded me of some of the movies that I watched during about the Holocaust. So how the completely, and then checkpoints, that was in 2016. We already know about, like, every 500 meter there are checkpoints that is specifically designed to check the Uyghurs and the other Turkic Muslims, but Han population no need to pass through the checkpoints. So in 2017, from April, we learned that this mass arrest started. So my last conversation with my brother, after 2 months, I couldn't get through to anyone in my family. I have 9 siblings, and my uncles and aunties, so many family members. Since October 2016, no one would answer my phone call. And then in January the 3rd, the last phone call I had with my brother, and he said, when I asked him why no one is answering my phone call, and he said they did the right thing, said, leave us in God's hands, and we leave you in God's hands too. So that was like chilling when I heard that, what he said to me. And from my translation work, I've already been getting a lot of information, some kind of classified, that there is some very serious crackdown is about to happen. And we did get some information passed on to us anonymously that there might be a genocide is going to happen against the Uyghurs. That was in 2017. When I alerted journalists, the people that I know, no one really took it seriously. And then April 2017, the mass arrest started. Radio Free Asia documented the mass arrest. In the beginning of January 2018, we learned that one of the top scholars, the Quranic a scholar who translated the Quran into Uyghur language and is a most celebrated moderate Imam, Muhammad Saleh, died in camp. That was in January. We learned that his family members, including his grandchildren, all gone, disappeared. So by 2018, in August, that was the first time the UN subgroup openly criticized China, said that we believe up to 1 million Uyghur and other Muslims are locked up. China denied in the beginning, then 2 weeks later, after confronted with all these satellite images and many reports by independent scholars, and then they said, well, we have this Muslim terrorists that we have to combat them. It's re-education and training facilities. So since then, we had the report from the BBC, and many other media started to report. Up until 2019, we saw very little actions in all free world. Then what changed was starting from US government passing the Uyghur Human Rights Act, and then the forced labor reports and many other reports that proved, now we believe, up to 3 million. We cannot confirm, but according to Dr. Adrian Zensi's analysis based on the Chinese own open sources, 1.8 million conservative estimate. And we do believe, because it never stopped arresting all this time, up until now, people still disappearing. So we believe up to 3 million Uyghurs and other Turkic Muslims are in these camps. And over 500,000, that's all, again, is a very conservative estimate. Children are locked up in state-run orphanages. And lately, a Chinese policeman confirmed that the facilities are very, very crowded and children are not given proper food in these facilities. And forced labor, according to the BBC report and Dr. Adrian Zensi's report, ASPI, SP report, all confirmed over 1 million, maybe more, Uyghurs are used as forced labor in the cotton fields and factories all around China. And we heard harrowing, terrible stories about what is happening inside these camps from 2 ex-camp teachers and about a handful of dozen survivors who spend time in different camps: torture, mass rape, sterilization, and just unbelievable terror that is happening. So at the moment, basically, compared to 2 years ago, I will say that the world learned a lot more about what is happening. And so a genocide is happening. We believe there is genocide happening. Up to 5 countries now, the parliaments have already declared that what the Chinese government doing against Uyghurs is a genocide. And recently, the Uyghur Tribunal, the first hearing was from the June 4th to the 7th. So we heard about 37 witnesses, and the second court hearing will be in September. So hoping that this independent tribunal will give a determination of what is happening in December. So that is what is happening to the Uyghurs. I can continue, but I must stop.
Thank you, Rahima. That's such an amazing, concise outline of the history and right up till to date. And some of it is chilling and some of it is heartbreaking, Rahima, hearing what your brother said to you. I don't think any of us will leave this evening without thinking of your brother saying, "Leave us in God's hands." I want to ask more about the tribunal because that's happening right now. And I also want to ask about the World Uyghur Congress and your work with them. Perhaps you could start by just telling us a little bit more about the tribunal, which is the point where you've just finished. And it's going to be reporting later, but I know that yet again have been following the proceedings there. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about it and how anybody listening can catch up with some of the hearings?
Yeah, any crime you know, when there is a crime happened against you, against your people, against or any country, there should be a court to give the name of the crime, what is going on. And because of the power of China, the economic power over many countries, including the UK, and simply there been like turning blind eyes about what is happening. I thought in 2018, when the UN first openly acknowledged the sheer number of 1 million, I thought the world will take action and there might be a chance that we can take China to court. But there is no chance for the Uyghurs, seek any kind of justice in ICC or ICJ because of the veto power, and also China is not a member of NATO. So the World Uyghur Congress, we appointed the People's Tribunal led by Sir Geoffrey Nice to look at all the evidence that we have. Because we felt that there are enough evidence that can make a determination, because unlike in the past, especially after 2018, the many more independent scholars did a lot of research and found out a lot of information, very, very powerful information, especially about the separation of children and forced abortion, sterilization, population control, and mass rape, torture, and all this is hallmarks of genocide, a crime against humanity. Even though there are parliaments already, the motion passed it calling it genocide, but many countries, including a majority Muslim countries, calling it that is the Western kind of propaganda against China, or calling it as a political decision. And therefore, we have already two legal opinions from the Essex Court Chamber and New Line Institute. But having a tribunal, listening to the witnesses, and then coming to a conclusion about what is happening, even though it cannot have the same weight as is in the court represent the state court or international court, but at least it can give a kind of opportunity, especially for these victims, to give evidence, and for the world to know more about what is happening. So I was the only in-person interpreter in court. So I did most of the camp survivors who came here, and also several several people who gave evidence about the family members, either children, their children missing, and family members disappeared, and have concrete information about what happened to them. And also the most, from my own experience of 4 days, heartbreaking testimonies that I had to interpret. And on the last day of hearing, I interpreted for the Chinese policeman, who already have given his written statement to the tribunal, confirming almost everything that we already know. But his voice is still, I couldn't get rid of that up until now, because I was maybe the only person who heard his voice not being distorted, because for me to interpret, for his safety reason, his voice has to be distorted, and every word that he said, including what is happening to children. And he said he was deployed from mainland China, 150,000 so-called policemen. He said, in fact, they are not the policemen, they are the unemployed people in mainland China, recruited as assistant police. And they went there, and they were told that you are dealing with terrorists, they are the enemy of a state, so you can do whatever you want. So they were given the full power to do whatever they want. That's why this rape and everything, all the horror is happening. It's a state-sponsored atrocities against the Uyghur people. So he confirmed the many different types of tortures, and he mentioned about how they would put a plastic bag and until the person cannot breathe, and only they remove the bag that they are just about to die. And he also mentioned witnessing many Uyghur men and women became insane after constant torture. And so it's been a very tough week, tough time for me and for all the Uyghurs, living in exile. But it's also kind of satisfaction that we felt that we gave a voice to all those people who was desperate for the world to listen. So that's the tribunal. Now the second hearing will be in September. So September they would like to hear more from the experts, more about the policy, that the policy or that the Chinese policy, the intent, and also more details about like forced labor and the many other aspects that can prove that the genocide is ongoing. So today we had another meeting, 3.5 hours since we started at 1 o'clock, just thanking all the supporters and also the survivors. So it's been a long day, but I'm actually very happy to, to give all this information and just most updated information to you. Yeah.
Thank you, Rahima. Goodness, I hadn't realised quite how up to date and hot off the press this information is tonight. Thank you. What an exhausting day you must have had, and we really appreciate you coming to us this evening. Perhaps while we're on the topic of the tribunals and that legal situation, now would be a good time to take a short break from a conversation with you, Rahima, and listen to Michael Polak, who will be joining us through a pre-recorded video, because unfortunately he couldn't be with us in person. And then after we've seen that video, we can come back and we can hear a little bit more about the World Uyghur Congress and your activism there, Rahima.
Thank you very much for having me today. This will be a very short presentation in regards to what's happening to the Uyghurs, setting out the key basis in law and facts in regards to what's happening, and also touching on what should be happening legally to counter the intense repression of the Uyghur people. Just a little bit about myself, so you know who I am. I'm a barrister practicing in London from Church Court Chambers. I practice in international law, human rights law, sanctions, criminal defense as well. I'm the director of Lawyers for Uyghur Rights. We've been set up to work across all different areas of law to try to stop and try to bring to justice those responsible for the terrible atrocities against the Uyghur and other ethnic Turkish people in East area. I do lots of work for the World Uyghur Congress, who are the representative body for the Uyghur people around the world, based in Munich, but with offices in Brussels, now in London, which is fantastic, and in the United States as well. So that's a little bit about me. Please follow us. If you're a lawyer and you want to get involved, please contact Lawyers for Uyghur Rights. We'd love to have you in touch. We'd love to have your help as well. I also run an organization called Justice Abroad, and we have lots of Uyghur and ethnic Turkish people as clients. Their families get in touch with us, so we do applications to the United Nations for them and advocate on their behalf. Here are some of the clients. I think it's very important to bring this back to individual people who are affected by what's going on, because it's very easy to talk about international issues where there's huge numbers of people being affected, but these are some of the individuals. We have Enver Turs and Ezemet Enver in the top photo. The bottom photo is in regards to the Hemdal brothers, who were two businessmen in the region who were providing support for people for education, and then they were sentenced to really hugely disproportionate prison sentences, and all their assets were stripped from them. On the next one, we have Noor and Nurse Mangal's entire family, who've been sent to camps or into prison. And at the bottom, Abdullah Mahmut, who's a 71-year-old retired forestry head in the region as well. What it really shows is that this issue touches Uyghurs from all different stratas of society. You've got shopkeepers to people who are, head of departments, intellectuals as well. So it really does touch on all levels of Uyghur society. And what's going on? In short, there is eradication of Uyghur identity. There are closing mosques, stopping Uyghur people from practicing their religion, and there's mass arbitrary detention you would have heard of by now. The interesting thing in regards to the mass detention in these camps is that the Chinese state said there are no camps, you're making it up, this kind of Western propaganda. And slowly they've changed their story about it until they've come to the point where they say, well, they're camps, but they're re-education camps, they're not detention camps. That's a very interesting point for you to think about. Why were they trying to hide what was going on? And I say it's because they knew how terrible it would look that they're detaining such a huge number of people based simply on their ethnicity. they also had arguments, and they criticized Western scholars and Uyghur activists in regards to the numbers. And in the end, they've actually, the evidence has come out which supports the numbers which have been put forward by activists in regards to people being placed in these camps. So I think it's very important to have a look at that and have a think about that, because often Uyghur activists, Western human rights lawyers get really attacked by the Chinese state, saying, you're making this up, this is propaganda. And then after the fact, it does actually, it's revealed that they were on the right track. There's torture of Uyghur people, forced labor and slavery, and really shockingly and shamefully for us, lots of the forced labor is being used by Western companies. And there's been a big action done recently against Volkswagen. They have factories in the region, which is absolutely shocking. And they haven't backed down. They say we're going to keep building cars in that region. And it's very, very, very likely they're using forced Uyghur labor to do so. So that's something which needs to stop. There's mass sterilization, population control, and the attempt to change the demographic of the region. And then there's systematic rape and torture, which we'll come to in a moment. The camps are a very big part of what's going on there. And it's arbitrary arrest of Uyghurs. And lots of our clients have reported their family members were asked to choose what criminal offense they were guilty of. So there is no proper criminal process. So the detainees are asked, well, you tell us what you're guilty of. We're giving you this sentence, whatever happens. As I said, the government denied the existence of these camps. There's been some fantastic research work done by young people around the world using satellite imagery and to show that these camps actually exist. There's also other research in regards to the mass purchase of cattle prods in the region as well. This was some of the earliest evidence. And we've come a very long way in talking about this issue. Just two and a half years ago, lots of people didn't know about it. The Western media wasn't reporting about it. And now we have the G7 and friends speaking about it. It's on the top of the agenda. So we are moving a long way with this issue, but I still think we're moving a little bit too slowly, given how terrible this is for the Uyghur people and the other Turkish people there. There's Kazakhs and Uzbeks as well, who are under the same systematic repression. A question I've been asked to address in regards to the People's Republic of China, in regards to crimes against humanity or genocide. Do you think there's merit to these allegations, and why? I'll just run through quickly the legal definitions. Here you go. In regards to crimes against humanity, it's a widespread or systematic attack directed against any civilian population, and it lists a whole range of the different offences which can make up crimes against humanity. In regards to genocide, I've got the definition for you there. Any of the following acts committed with an intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such, killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, and forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. We'll come on to some of the evidence in a moment, but I think what we're really concentrating on at the moment is D&E, the measures to prevent births, and there is more and more evidence now. There is an intention to prevent births of ethnic Uyghur children, and forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Lots of evidence has come out about Uyghur children being removed from their families and put into boarding schools, or I say boarding school, but it's more like a prison camp for children. And this evidence is coming out now, which is good. So no one can say they didn't know about what's actually taking place there. The evidence of genocides started to emerge. There's this fantastic report by Dr. Adrian Zenz, where he talks about how there is a specific population control regime instituted by the Chinese Communist Party, and it's aimed at suppressing minority population growths. And the biggest minority in the Uyghur region, of course, are the Uyghur people. Where are we getting this evidence of genocide? Where can you look if you want to go and do some research to see what's going on? The BBC did a fantastic report into systematic rape and torture in the camps. Essex Court Chambers put together an opinion which is very well written, and it addresses crimes against humanity and genocide. And they say that there seems to be evidence of genocide taking place, including deliberate infliction of harm on Uyghurs in detention, measures to prevent women giving birth, including sterilization and abortion, which I've already spoken about, and the forcible transfer of Uyghur children out of the community. The New Lines Institute also did their own report. And quite recently, there was a new peer-reviewed study by Dr. Adrian Zenz. This is a further study, it came out about a week ago, and it says that Chinese birth control policies could reduce the ethnic minority population in the region by up to a third over the next 20 years. So this seems to prove that genocidal intent to destroy in whole or in part the Uyghur people. The next question I've been asked to speak about is something I'm quite passionate about. It's about how to use the international tribunals, the international legal order, to bring justice to people who've been repressed like the Uyghur people have been. And the question is, neither the ICJ or ICC have jurisdiction to hold China accountable for these crimes. What role does the recent Uyghur tribunal play as a people's tribunal in the fight for justice? In regards to the Uyghur tribunal, the Uyghur tribunal has been set up to provide a voice for the Uyghur people, to provide a legal decision based on the evidence that it hears. And I think it will have a great amount of force when it makes its decision sometime at the end of this year. So I think that's very welcome. It will be of great use to states around the world when they make political decisions about how they respond to the repression of the Uyghur people by China. They'll be able to use this evidence. They'll be able to use the pronouncements of the court with really top international lawyers who have considered the evidence and made their decision. So I think that's a very welcome step. I think that an advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice could be really good. And this is just a bit of a kind of left field idea I had, and some of the lawyers who are watching may enjoy this idea. But if you have the G7 plus friends states who all agree that the individuals perpetrating crimes against humanity and probably genocide against the Uyghur people should be held responsible, and all or most of these states have universal jurisdiction provisions in which it doesn't matter where a crime against humanity or genocide takes place, they can be tried within the domestic courts of that state. So they could come together and say, well, we're going to have these trials, or we're going to have an investigation process in one of our states, whether that be the United States, whether that be Australia or Japan or wherever. And we're going to investigate, we're going to collect the evidence, so we're going to set up our own investigation mechanism, because the United Nations still hasn't set up a proper investigations and evidence collection mechanism in regards to the Uyghur people, which is quite shocking given how long this has actually gone on for. We're going to set up our own mechanism to collect evidence, and then when we do have that evidence, we're going to put together a domestic tribunal with the international characters and within our own domestic law, using our own universal jurisdiction provisions. So some type of hybrid tribunal under the domestic law of one of the states, supported by all the countries around the world who believe there should be criminal responsibility for crimes against humanity and genocide against the Uyghur people. So hopefully I've given you a very brief tour of the legal background to this. Thank you so much for coming along. It's very important we have people like you interested in what we're doing, getting involved. Please do get in contact with me if you'd like to get more involved. Thank you.
Wow, what a fantastic presentation from Michael. Kirsty and Ephraim, I'm sure you will thank Michael hugely on behalf of all of us for such an in-depth and succinct presentation about the legal context, as well as the very specific information about what's happening with Uyghur Muslims. Please do give him a heartfelt thank you from all of us here. Rahima, just picking up from some of what Michael was saying and what you were saying about the tribunal hearings, what does that mean to you now?
Well, as I said, any crime, any kind of injustice that you want, the first step to seek justice is to give the name to the crime. What is happening? tribunal is at the moment is the only option. We did fight 3 times, I believe, the genocide amendment to the trade bill. We hoped that the UK can have a domestic court that can examine what is happening, but we didn't get anywhere. But the Uyghur Tribunal, as Michael also mentioned, that it will give a legal determination. And we hope that other countries, as I am an advisor on IPAC, Interparliamentarian Alliance on China, so about 21 countries, the parliamentarians, co-chairs. We are hoping that once we have that, we don't know what is the outcome yet, but only after December, I believe around December or before next year, we will have the determination. If the determination is genocide and crime against humanity, then we will take to next step. The step is we will campaign the countries to accept the tribunal determination, including this country. We already have parliamentarians are asking questions during the parliament questions, whether they will take seriously of the tribunal determination. And so if not, then we will still have to work, try to get any domestic or any other court to make a determination, because this is the only route. There is no any other route for the countries to take any meaningful action against China under the Genocide Convention.
Rahima, you're working so hard for this. You, as Kirsty said at the beginning, you're a singer and a translator. Now you're an activist, and you're working so hard on this campaign. Where do you find the strength?
It's the people. When I think about those millions are locked up in camps, and there might be my family members, and there are children separated from their parents. I saw some videos that there's confused kids crying, and as I said earlier, the Chinese police, and he confirmed. He said these facilities are so poor. He said the children are in crowded condition, bunk beds, and for food they were and also the aim is to completely eradicate the Uyghur identity and culture. And for me, as a singer, coming from a very strong cultural background, also a religious background. My father was an imam. My mother's family, the generation of musicians and singers, and I inherited that beautiful part of the Uyghur culture. And from young age, I've been singing, and although my education from primary school to university was Chinese, it wasn't forced. I chose to go to Chinese school, but I never was diluted from my own culture because of my love of my own people and my culture, my music, and all this. So the music gives me strength. It helps me to balance my emotion. And anytime when I feel desperate, I put the music on, and sometimes I just dance in this room, looking in the mirror, and that helps me. That's a way of during the lockdown. That's one of the ways that I've been. And as soon as I go into the kitchen, start cooking, I will be singing. This is, I strongly believe, from a very strong religious and spiritual background, I believe that everything is all given by God for me to you know, to serve. And I often ask myself why I was so determined to live in 2000, you know, and now I can see that, because you know, in every atrocities, you need to have people, the witness, that, you know, people have the ability tell the story, to, you know, use everything, you know, that with me, from my also music, I have a lot of followers, and that is again through music and art, poetry, I can tell a story, and people, you know, raising awareness very effectively. And all this, I think it's unique, and it's God-given talent, and passion and love. And through this very hard journey, since 2016, I made so many beautiful friends, and young people like Kirsty and Jaya, and many, you know, yourself. These are the kind of strengths and satisfaction, happiness for me. So yeah, the journey is hard, is heartbreaking, at the same time is also fulfilling. And I do believe nothing will last forever. I do believe this will end, but we just have to work harder. So yeah, the strength comes from my people, and especially when I look at those the survivors, and then I compare myself. I just think I am so fortunate. I didn't go through all that, those horrors that they have been through, and therefore I feel I have duty to do more, with whatever I can.
So
Yeah.
what can we do, Rahima? Many of us on this call will be wanting to do our bit to help, but what kind of actions can we take? What would you like us to go away and do after this evening?
You are already doing a lot, Olivia, and I mean, yet again, and you know, just putting this event itself is something really important. Number one thing is, of course, raising awareness is important. So we need more events to raise awareness, to get people involved. And there are many campaigns that, you know, I, through working with as a project director for the World Uyghur Congress, and then I set up the campaign Stop Uyghur Genocide campaign. Now we had funding, and so we did 1 year completely relying on volunteers, and so now we are recruiting some staff members to run this campaign, so we can do more than what we did before. So visit the Stop Uyghur Genocide websites, and we have many different campaigns that is ongoing, and that we will have new campaigns. And for especially like young people, follow Yet Again, and Yet Again is working very closely with the Stop Uyghur Genocide. And so I will pass, I think, the rest to Kirsty. Maybe Kirsty can explain more the work that they've been doing and what others can do. We managed to educate and raise awareness among our MPs. At least I can say that 2 years ago, we were far behind. But through the genocide amendment to the trade bill and the genocide motion, and so I believe our MPs are educated, but we still need more MPs to really put extreme pressure on the government to make a decision, especially when it comes to the trade with China. We believe that that is the least this government can do. We are not asking government to declare war against China. We are asking something that they can do. You know, the trade agreements and other sanctions that the individuals that we know, for example, Ban Chen campaign. Chen Quanguo is the party secretary who was appointed, not elected. So only in China you will only get appointed. So it's appointed since August 2016, who served as a party secretary in Tibet for 5 years, terrorizing Tibetans, introducing grid systems. And so again, it was the genocidal intent in Tibet, trying to eliminate the Tibetan identity and culture. So this man now, he is serving in my country as a party secretary. He's a top guy who is architect behind all this camp system and all the atrocities. And he was not sanctioned. There were 4 officials sanctioned, but not him. He was sanctioned by the US. So there is another campaign. We have a petition on, Ban Chen, so Chen Zhenguo. So many other campaigns that is ongoing, and also education and the setup kind of, I know there are Holocaust education, and I think whether we can set up Uyghur genocide education, to educate young people. So there are many things that we can do. Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
will pass on to Kirsty, and maybe Kirsty can update you with our latest campaign. And thank you.
Thank you, Rahima. That's a lot of very specific actions that people can take. It was really helpful, and I'm sure many people on this call will want to be going forward after this evening and doing their best to help. I said earlier that you'd left us with some shocking and heartbreaking moments. Delighted you've left us with a very uplifting one as well. And we can picture you dancing in your sitting room and singing in your kitchen. And that image will keep us going as well, Rahima. Thank you. I know you've had a very, very busy day today, as you've told us. I know SCoJeC has as well with your AGM earlier. It's a real credit to everybody who works so hard for the benefit of others to come to this event too. So I'll close this bit of the conversation and hand over to Kirsty, because I'm aware that many questions have been coming in. So just a personal thank you from me, Rahima, and I'll hand back to Kirsty.
Thank you, Olivia, and thank you, Rahima, for such a really powerful discussion. We've had lots of questions coming in the chat, but I believe, and actually I'd like to take this opportunity, whilst Michael couldn't be here to answer questions himself, I'm delighted to say one of my fellow co-exec directors at Yet Again, Joe Collins, has run in to take over from Michael. So if any of you have any legal questions about what's going on, Joe is more than happy to fill a gap there. I believe we have a question from Anna Cardy. Anna, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Hello? Is that working? Cool. So I had the privilege of attending parts of the Uyghur Tribunal with my colleagues Yet Again. And we heard a lot about the term cultural genocide, and we're just wondering what's the difference between that and genocide as such.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to take this one. So cultural genocide is something we've heard a lot about in respect of the Uyghurs. It's important because international law is exceptionally restrictive when it comes to genocide. So, for example, Raphael Lemkin, he coined the term genocide, and genocide was a concept before it was a crime. And that incorporated cultural destruction of a group, physical destruction of a group, biological destruction of a group, the various techniques for destroying human groups. Ultimately, that's what genocide is, the destruction of human groups. Now, international law only recognises physical destruction of the groups and excludes what we've come to know as cultural destruction of the groups. And the reason it becomes quite difficult in respect of the Uyghurs is because it's multifaceted, this genocide. So there is immense cultural destruction. As Rahima identified, they're attempting to eradicate the Uyghur people as an identity. Indeed, Joe Smith Finlay, an academic at the tribunal, described this as an identity castration. So certainly there is a systematic and coordinated attempt to eliminate the Uyghur people as a people. The question for international law and for the tribunal and for any other legal determination isn't necessarily focused on cultural destruction per se. It will look at physical destruction. Are the Uyghurs being physically or biologically destroyed? Very briefly, and I can go into more detail if someone has a further question, but the answer to that is yes. So alongside the cultural destruction, which we are seeing oppressively and immensely being committed against the Uyghurs, we're also seeing physical destruction. You will have heard from both Rahima and Michael's talk of forced sterilisation and forced abortion. This has already had a detrimental impact on the Uyghur population. For example, in various counties, the birth rate has already reduced between, depending on the county, between 50 to 80%. Adrian Zenz, in a recent report, has estimated that under the present trajectory, you will suppress 2.6 to 4.5 million Uyghur births within the region. And China is doing this on the premise of breaking their origins, breaking their roots, and is doing it to, as what they call, optimize. What they mean is dilute the ethnic ratio within the Uyghur region. They wish to reduce the Uyghur population and enhance the Han population to readjust that ratio. That is seeing the biological destruction of Uyghurs. We are seeing a genocide committed against the Uyghurs. So even though cultural genocide per se doesn't have any meaning within law, states should take notice because that's where it leads.
Thank you, Joe. I'd now like to invite Kirsten Oswald, MP for East Renfrewshire, to ask her question.
Thank you, Kirsty, and thanks so much, Rahima, for all of the information that you shared with us today, especially, as Olivia said, after such a full day already. I was interested in the discussion about forced labour, and thought that that was something that if people were more aware of, that they would be deeply concerned by as well. I think it brings it into a very personal space for people, and I wondered if you were able to tell us more about what that actually looks like in reality.
So about forced labour. Well, forced labour is not a new thing. I mean, most of the people, even before I left, that I know of who served in prison, especially the political prisoners, they all worked in long hours in camps, in labor camp, even though the Chinese government promised that abolished that labor camp system, but I don't think that ever in reality happened. And also after 1 year running the camp, mass interning the people, the Chinese policemen also confirmed in some villages, no one left. No one left in the village. They were all taken to camps. And the food in these camps, what we heard from all these survivors was absolutely just said they were given a food that just to survive. They tried to run the camp with very little cost, and imagine incarcerating million people. So what happened then 1 year later, from 2018, then we learned that some detainees, they said they are graduated. They were graduated. In fact, they were just changed from these torture camps, moved them to factories. Some that they build factories inside camps. That was also detected by some experts through satellite images, that the changes of camp, how before, what was like 1 year before and what was like 1 year later. For example, in Kashgar, there are many factories are being built alongside or inside the camps. So these people were forced to work 12 to 15 hours without any payment. And then also the BBC report, John Sudwas, his report last year also confirmed that the cotton picking was also largely done by this forced labor. And 84% of China's cotton come from my region. And one of the reasons why China has this very strong control under the persecution is the resource as well. The East Turkestan, I call it, or the Uyghur region, is full of resources. They say white gold and black gold. White gold is the cotton. Black gold means the gas and natural oil and petrochemical industry is a very booming industry. And I myself, I studied petrochemical engineering as degree because there was a huge demand. So this is the reality. And during the COVID in 2020, obviously, the lockdown in China happened before us. During that, at the height of COVID, and we saw this TikTok videos that was released by these young people. They're very clever. They try to tell the world what is happening. The thousands and thousands of the young people were herded at the train stations, waiting to be taken to various parts of factories in mainland China. So ASPI report, I would highly recommend people to read, and identified over 80 brands the supply chain is tainted by forced labor. And therefore we have a coalition called End the Forced Labor Coalition to stop the forced labor. Yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Thank you so much. That's so helpful, and I'm sure it paints a picture for all of us.
Thank you, Kirsten and Rahima. Somebody popped a question in anonymously earlier discussing more of these companies who are profiting from slave labor should be highlighted. Rahima, what more can we do to ensure that those names are out there?
You mean the names of the companies, or the? Yeah, if you visit the website Call to Action and Forced Labor, there are names of all the factories. I don't remember from just back of my head, but we know Nike and many other big brands, including Apple. We know H&M has pulled out, and the Marks and Spencers as well made a decision after the Call to Action. So there are many brands out there. I think maybe you can, thank you for that. So people can follow that. Try to boycott those brands that is, still willing to source from the Uyghur region, knowing that their supply chains are tainted by forced labor. So if the people locked up in camp, you think that you have nothing to do with them. They are just far away, they're not. But if you look at the forced labor, their hard work and the slave products are in your door, you're buying, and you are giving the opportunity for these companies who are facilitating this forced labor, and actually you become part of that crime as well. So I feel very, very strongly that people should really, ask themselves questions when they buy product, especially cotton products.
Thank you, Rahima. I'd like to go to Eloise, who I believe has a question for Olivia and Rahima.
Hi, so I've heard from many survivors of genocides in the past, like Holocaust survivors, Rwanda survivors, and I was very lucky to be at the tribunal and to have heard from Rahima a couple of times in the past year. So I guess I just wanted to know, why is it so important that everyone continues to get involved and hear from people like you.
Thank you very much. Look, the scale of the abuse by the CCP that we are facing, the Uyghurs facing, is unimaginable, and that we are suffering. Countries are not really taking meaningful actions. The UN is like a broken system for many obvious reasons. China is very powerful with a, in the world, on the world stage because of its economic power. Many countries' dependency that led them to become very silent. Also, the economic trade and therefore, governments needs to be pressured by the people. People's power actually can work, and we need more people. We need more people to put pressure on the government so the government can act. If government already acted, I wouldn't be working so tirelessly. Basically, I don't have weekends. Since 2016, since that last call with my brother, I hardly have, even when I'm not working, my mind is not free, because there is this frustration and sadness and helplessness. And the only way that we can make a difference is that more people can take action, more people help these very helpless people. People cannot even speak. Soon after the tribunal, 1 day or 2 days later, China's government did a press conference, hearing the family members of the survivors who gave evidence and countering their statement, and are forcing their brothers and sisters of these camp survivors to say that they never been to camps, they were lying. So can you imagine the trauma and the pain that these survivors are going through? And it doesn't cost anything for people who doesn't have any family connections in the region to do more. For Uyghurs in exile, majority choose to remain silent because of this extreme pressure, because they feel that if they really spoke the truth, their families will be in even more dangerous situation. And therefore, I think it is important that more people to give voice and to join the campaign and to help. Thank you.
Thank you, Eloise. I'd like to answer the question by going back to the founding documents that established Holocaust Memorial Day that were written in the year 2000. And I've always found this a very powerful phrase. They describe the Holocaust as an episode that threatened the fabric of civilization. What does that mean? It means that the Holocaust wasn't just an episode that affected the Jewish people of Europe. It threatened the fabric of civilization. It threatened what it means to be civilized. And we mark the Holocaust for many reasons. It has many resonances today. And we mourn the people who were murdered, not just because of the scale or the way they were murdered, but because they were human. We mourn them because they were persecuted because of who they were, which community they belonged to. And it showed us what ultimately can happen when persecution based on somebody's faith or culture or community goes on without being challenged, without being checked. And when we commemorate the Holocaust, we know one of the first things we learn is that anti-Semitism didn't stop and other kinds of prejudice based on someone's identity didn't stop. and that genocides have happened since. And when we learn about what's happening to Uyghur Muslims, whether or not it's described legally as a genocide, I might differ from Rahima on that point, but it is targeted persecution of people in an attempt to eradicate their culture. One of the Holocaust survivors with whom we work very closely, Dr. Martin Stern, described civilization as a very thin veneer. It's so fragile. We cannot take it for granted. So much of what we see around us is showing that civilization pulling apart. That fabric is pulling apart. And that affects us, whether it happens in the Xinjiang region of China, whether it happened in Rwanda, whether it happened in the Holocaust 76 years ago. Our civilization has to be actively protected. And what we're seeing in China now is an attempt it obviously is an attempt of persecution and an eradication of Uyghur culture, but that threatens us because that is threatening the civilized world we live in. We live in such an interconnected world, and it's a threat to us if civilization in one part of the world is being pulled apart. I could go on because I feel very strongly about this, but I know there are many other questions as well.
Thank you, Olivia. I'm realizing that we are getting on a little bit, and I think we've all had very long days at this point. So I'd like to go to Rahima for one last question, and that is, Rahima, you work so tirelessly. I've seen you, do horrifically long days and incredible work. What is the one thing you would like everybody in attendance tonight to take away from hearing you speak?
Thank you. Compassion is so important. When you have compassion, and you will have the will to act. And when you have the will to act, you will go and look, and you will find the best thing that you can do, because every individual, we all have different skills in, doing things. So use your skills. If you only just think, now I've heard what is happening and I am going to act. If you have that will, then that will make you act. And so the least you can do is follow me on Twitter and or just retweet things that I tweet, and follow many others like Dr. Adrian Zenz and other scholars who can visit the Stop Uyghur Genocide website and join the campaign. Write to your MP. It's never too much. It's always is important when MPs can receive more letters, even if it is like same letters, that also prompt them to act. So yeah, I want to ask you more than compassion and prayers.
Thank you so much, Rahima, and thank you, Olivia, and all of you for joining. And I'd now like to pass over to the Chair of the Scottish Council of Jewish Communities, Nicola Livingston, to close tonight's event. Thank you, Nicola.
Unmute myself, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for this important conversation about what is happening to the Uyghur community in China. I'm sure I speak for everyone here when I say it's been a privilege to listen to Rahima and Rahima share her story and her in-depth knowledge. Thank you, Rahima, for joining us this evening, especially after such a long and obviously traumatic session you've had earlier today. We are so grateful to you for making the time to come and speak with us and let us know what we can do to help. You've provided us with a lot of detail, and I've certainly learned a lot of reflection and a lot to think about. Thank you also to Olivia Marks-Woldman, OBE, an honorary Scot, having lived in Glasgow for a number of years, for chairing this event for us. We're grateful to you for chairing this so ably, especially when it's been such an important topic. Whilst he wasn't able to be here in person, we'd also like to extend our gratitude to Barrister Mark Polak for his legal insights and in-depth analysis into what is happening to the Uyghurs and the issue of genocidal intent, the status of the Uyghur Tribunal and the International Court of Justice. Special thanks to Yet Again for bringing this event to us. I'm proud to say that Yet Again is a youth-led initiative co-founded by Kirsty from SCoJeC, which seeks to allow young people a space to raise awareness of modern atrocity. They've recently been working hard to raise awareness of the Uyghur genocide and show people that you have the power to help achieve change in society. Thank you to Kirsty, Joe, and the Yet Again team for their work in putting this event together. Normally, in bringing this event to a close, I would say safe home. But in these circumstances, I wish everyone well and look forward to when we can meet again in person. Good night, everyone.